Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Sue.
And we are so excited to be here this morning with another live conversation. And today we're going to be talking about connecting the dots. What do you do with your strengths once you feel like you know what they are? How do you apply them to your job today, or maybe something that you want to be doing in the future? And so in our last conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we missed being with you all last week, but in our last live conversation, we talked about some ways that you can discover your strengths. So if you haven't yet watched that, we recommend that you go back and watch that. But whether you feel like you know what your strengths are or not, we just hope that you get value from this, because we're actually going to be starting off with some high level things that you can think about to try to identify your strengths from a big picture perspective. And then we're going to be diving into different ways that you can apply your strengths and how you connect the dots. So actually, Sue, I'm going to turn it over to you, and she's going to be kicking us off with, what are some things we should be thinking about when we want to identify our strengths from a big picture perspective?
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, Jenny and I really thought about, we wanted to make this useful for everyone. Some of you may have taken the Strengths Finder now, and some may not have, and that's okay. So we wanted to just give you some things to think about. So I mentioned this briefly in our last video, but Gallup has defined 4 areas of domain of strengths. And I find, from a big picture perspective, this is really helpful to think about, even if you haven't taken the assessment. So I'm just going to run through each one of those domains and think for yourself, which resonates for you, which of those domains feels like you, and you can kind of see yourself in action in those. The first domain is really the getting things done domain. Gallup calls it executing, but it's really, if you're one of those people that is really good at just taking ideas and making stuff happen, maybe you're a list maker and you just love to check things off that list. Or maybe you have tons of stamina, and when there's goals in front of you, you just go after it and people can count on you to get stuff done. Or maybe, you just are one of those people who you just do what you say you're going to do. And, people count on you in that way. If that sounds like you, then you probably have a number of strengths or innate talents in that executing domain. The next domain is called the influencing domain. And this domain is really, if you think about those people who are just really good communicators, or, just sort of naturally take on those leadership roles, they have presence. It's really about getting people on board with your ideas, whether that's an individual or a group of people. So if that sounds like you, maybe you're driven by making a big difference and you're sort of drawn to the stage, or, you love to sort of win people over. All those things are signs of influencing strengths. The third domain is relationship building. And that is really, if you're just really good at connecting with people, building authentic relationships, maybe you're the person that glues a group together. You sort of create that chemistry. Then you probably have a lot of strengths in the relationship building domain. Or maybe you just love having one-on-one conversations with people, or you're sort of that person that can facilitate a group. The last domain is called strategic thinking. And people who have a lot of strengths in this domain are just really good at thinking through things, taking ideas, solving problems. Maybe you're really good at analyzing things, or, like I said, solving problems, or coming up with a strategic plan, or learning. All those are signs of that strategic thinking domain, and all that happens, up here in your head. So those are the 4 domains. And as we go through, Jenny's going to give you an example of how she has connected the dots, so you can see that. But I want you to be thinking about, what are your goals and what outcomes do you want? And how do you tap into the strengths that you already have to make that happen?
I love that, Sue. You explained that way better than I could. But I'm curious, before we go on, well, a couple things. One, I see my friend Cindy is watching us. So hi, Cindy, thanks for dialing in and joining us. And also, Sue, I would just love, I'm curious, do you want to share what domain you lead with?
Yes, I lead with relationship building.
I
And
so see that in you.
secondary, it's sort of relationship building, strategic thinking.
Yeah,
What
I
about you?
love it. I love it. I lead with influencing and then strategic thinking.
Uh-huh, that makes perfect
So,
sense. I
yes.
always go to you when I need help with my influencing.
It's fun being able to partner with somebody that their strengths, and you can start to really see like where we just complement each other, and we can lean on each other for different things. And so that's
Yeah,
a side note for all of you watching. It's so cool when you can actually, like do an assessment or really get to the bottom of your strengths. And then if you have a close friend or partner, whatever, that you can do that together, family members. So it's a fun thing to do. And it's
it is.
beneficial too.
And you're so patient with me with my strategic plans.
Oh gosh, you're so patient with me. Okay, well, Sue and I, she mentioned I was going to share an example, and she's going to share some examples too. But we were planning for this live conversation, and we were really wanting to share what would be most valuable and most helpful to you. And we were thinking about, okay, what's the best way to help people really connect the dots, with your strengths? And we thought it just might be best to share our own personal examples and how this has played out and what it's looked like in our own lives. So that's just what we're going to do for the rest of this video, is just share a few things and go back and forth. And again, whether if you just heard Sue talk about the domains that Gallup uses, so whether you've taken this Clifton Strengths test or not, just even hearing those domains and being able to see maybe where your strength zone might be the most, that might give you some clarity. You don't have to be watching this and know exactly like, oh, here's my top 3 strengths. But again, go back to that video we talked about last time, because it is so beneficial to be able to really know your strengths, because then you can lean into them. And the more time you spend on your natural talents, the stronger they become. So all of that to say, the example I thought of when I wanted to share, how strengths have played out in my own life, was actually from years ago, before I even knew that I led with influencing strengths, or that one of my top 10 strengths was communication. And so this was before I had really figured out my strengths and leaned into them. But for those of you who know me, you may know that part of my professional journey is writing, and I started out writing children's books. Well, after that season, I moved into mom blogging. And so when I started my mom blog, I kind of did everything wrong. So what I did was I studied all other mom blogs out there, and I was noticing, what people were writing about and how they were writing it. And so I created my mom blog. I called it My Cup to Yours. And I envisioned, sharing a cup of coffee with another mom virtually, that whole type of thing. And I had all these ideas about things that I wanted to write. But rather than just sitting down and writing in my true voice, I was trying to emulate other mom bloggers. So I wasn't going and copying blog posts or anything like that, but I was really being intentional about what's everybody else doing. And I kind of had this, I should be doing the same thing in my mind too. And so I started writing and posting these blog posts, and I got crickets. I mean, it wasn't resonating with anybody. And I was like, this isn't really, gaining traction. And I was trying to build an online community, and it just wasn't happening. And so I spent time doing that and just kind of growing into my own writing voice and everything. But it wasn't until I took a step back and just started showing up and being me. And I realize now that I know that I lead with influencing strengths, and now that I know that one of my strengths is communication, um, I can look at that and say, oh, I started leaning into my strengths. I started using my strengths. But at the time, I just started being more comfortable being me and just writing from my heart and writing, stories about what was going on with my kids or helpful tips for other moms. And it was when I started doing that and really leaning into my strength of communication and being myself and sitting in my own voice and sharing my own voice, that is when my blog started to resonate with other moms and doors started to open and things like that. So again, at the time, I didn't really know, oh, I'm leaning into my strength, and therefore my strength is becoming even stronger, and I'm showing up as my authentic self. And I didn't really know all of that, but looking back now, I can totally see how that played out. And so it is really a cool thing when you realize what your strengths are, and then you lean into those and you use your strengths. And the other thing, and I think Sue and I are going to touch on this, throughout our conversation, is it just helps you not compare yourself to others. Like, you don't have to feel like, when you know your strengths, you can lead with those strengths and you live in those strengths and you use them, and it really helps to, and we mentioned this last time, it helps you to appreciate your unique value and the unique value of others. And you don't have to try to be like other people or emulate other people, kind of like I did when I first started blogging. You really just lean into who you are and your strengths. And that's when you're in your strength zone, and that's when you're really in your sweet spot. So, but I'd love to hear a story from you, Sue, or an example from you, or if you have any thoughts on what I just shared.
Yeah, that is such a great example. When you think about like how you showed up in that way, can you think of other examples that show up for you in your life where you're like, oh yeah, like that's similar in terms of, you expressing yourself?
Yeah, and it's honestly, and this is kind of goofy, but the first thing that comes to mind is, and this is so simple and it's a personal example, but one of my top strength is falls in the strategic domain, and it's futuristic. And I, even just planning family vacations, like I'm the one, like we went to Washington, DC with our kiddos. It was, I think, 2 years ago now. And it was like, oh, I planned the whole thing. And I also have activator as my third strength. So, there's the lists and wanting to get things done. But it was like, that was just me. And I mean, everybody every day was like, what are we doing, mom? And it was just like, oh, I get on fire for that kind of a thing, because that's who I am. And that's how I naturally think. And again, it's a personal example. It's kind of a silly example, but when you're doing something that's in your strength zone and it's true to who you are, that's when you're energized and you do it well. And you show up as your best self, even if it's in planning vacations for your family. So that's what comes to mind.
So I bet for you, when you sit down to plan anything, taking time to tap into that visionary, futuristic side of you, where you can see everything in full detail and you just have that picture, I bet that's so important for you.
Yeah, it is. And it's fun. It's really fun too. And that's been one of the exciting things, just even like in our partnership, Sue, is like just even, envisioning the future of this Facebook group and how it can help women, and also starting my own business and those kinds of things. I get really energized by that. So,
And it's interesting when I think about a lot of clients I've worked with, one of the themes, especially when they have that futuristic theme, is, our world moves so fast now, and we don't often give ourselves time and permission to just plan or tune in,
yeah.
or it's like that 10 minutes in the morning or whatever. And so oftentimes when I find that, clients have that strength and they're feeling really overwhelmed and sort of like they're reacting to everything,
Yeah.
one of the things we work on is, how do you get yourself back into your strength zone? And whatever, it looks different for everybody. Sometimes it's like, hey, I want to spend some time before I go to bed thinking about the next day, or I need to go on a run so I can kind of get that vision, or whatever it is. But it's like,
Yeah.
being your own advocate so that you can create that strength zone for yourself,
Yeah.
which is what you did naturally. It also makes me think of, you and I were talking about bright spots and how we thought maybe that was really just about being aware of your strengths. But I think it can also help here. It's like you were able to identify another example, right? So when you think about doing something, you want to create something, or you have a goal, it's like you could ask yourself, when have I achieved something like this in the past? When did it work best for me? Like, what were the bright spots and what did I do?
Yeah.
And sort of start to frame it in, what strengths was I leading with?
Yeah.
Which of those domains was I using? A lot of relationship building strengths, or was I using my communication skills, or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And that will give you some clues.
And you know what else I love about that, Sue, and I'm so glad you brought that up, is just even from like a neuroscience perspective, that helps to build confidence too, because when we can reflect on times that we've been successful using our strengths in the past, our brains, we want to stay comfortable. And so we avoid sometimes new and uncomfortable situations. So looking back on the times that our strengths have helped us to be successful can give us confidence to apply them in the future as well. And I love that.
Yeah, that's
Love that.
example. I was also thinking of an example. I'll share my own too, but I was thinking about one of my mentors at Gallup. He's he was the master at strengths. He passed away, but anyway, what he used to share was he doesn't have a lot of relationship building strengths, and he's a little bit shy. So he discovered that he could use his learner strength, which is a strategic thinking strength. to connect with people. It's like that sort of inspired him to want to get to know people, to learn about them, and things like that. Or I think he has input or had input as well. So that's just an example of how you can kind of really be really creative with your strengths, and it looks different for everyone.
I love that. I totally love that. And Sue, before you get into your example, can I share a question we got from Cindy?
Yes.
And I think you'll do a great job answering this. Okay, she says, how do you know what your top 2 domains are? My top is definitely executing, but not sure how to determine which is next.
Well, if you want to do it the easy way, you could just take the assessment. And when you get the report, it will actually tell you. You'll have an idea. What I do is if I'm analyzing a full report, which is your 34 strengths in all, I take the top 10 and I count how many strengths are in each domain. But the report also gives you an idea of what you lead with. But the other way to do it is to just observe, just kind of really think about some of those bright spots, and what, when do you come most alive, and what inspires you, like or what motivates you. So if your second domain is influencing, then you're really going to be motivated by getting people on board, or winning people over, those sorts of things. You have anything to add to that, Genny?
Well, I was going to say, and I love how you answered that. Cindy says, I've taken it and have my 34. Okay, so my next would be relationship building based off my top 10. Okay, so it sounds like you've got it, Cindy. Yeah, and there's a page in there that actually tells you if it's and you have taken, it sounds like, the Clifton Strengths Report, but for anybody else watching who's like, what are they talking about? What assessment? It's the Clifton Strengths Report. You can find it, just Google Gallup. It's by Gallup. But in that report, when you get the top 34, which is, you can either take the assessment, that's your top 5, which is a great place to start, or you can take get your whole strengths report, which is 34, which is what sounds like you've done, Cindy. There's a page in there that says you lead with this domain, and it explains the domains and everything. So it sounds like you're good. So thank you for that question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And so Sue, I'm going to pass it back to you, because I know we were talking about, one of the ways to think about your strengths and apply your strengths is to think about like what goal or what outcome you want and how your strengths can play into that. So I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah. So I was thinking about my own example. And I think I shared in one of our other videos that my goal with my business has really been in this last year to, go have more of an online presence, which I've avoided I've had my practice for 12 years, and I've effectively avoided that for about 10 of them. So, but I'm at this new place where I'm really committed to it, and I'm really excited about it. But so one of my sub goals is to build my list, just trying to get out there and do that sort of thing. And, when I think back even 10 years ago when I started, there was a coach that I found myself trying to emulate, and she was amazing at building her list. Like she was so good at social media. She was so good at everything. And, that in that realm. And I just found myself falling flat, trying to do the things that she was doing. Now, fast forward, 10 years, what I have found is, now that I know my strengths, I don't have a ton of influencing strengths that help me in this area. I wish I did. I'm so envious of your communication, Genny. But anyway,
you do great.
But anyway, so what I need to do, and what works better for me, is to tap into my strategic thinking strengths, which is I have learners. So when I can really learn about how to do, like I've watched webinars and I've, learned about social media and things like that, it makes me feel a lot more comfortable, and it puts me in my strength zone. And then I can tap into my relationship building strengths and, have a more personal approach, which fits better for me. It takes a little longer, but it just, ultimately it's more me. It makes my expression more authentic. And then of course I seek help from you, Genny, and people who I know who are really good at influencing type things. Um, so that's my example. And I think, when I think about that, um, one of the key things, and I think you touched on this, Genny, is when we give ourselves permission to be in our strength zone and do it our own way. Like, you have this outcome and you're going to get there in a way that fits best for you. It just feels better. It gives you more energy, um, and it gives you more confidence.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I also love that you just mentioned like how we collaborate and I lean on you for your strengths too. And the thing that I like about that, and we posted something in our, in this group a little while ago that, one key thing to have when you're pursuing your dreams is other people by your side. And so it's really great when you can think about, okay, you don't have to be well-rounded and have every strength that there is. Really think about your strengths, the unique value you bring to the table, how you can contribute. And then for the areas that you're not necessarily leading with, then collaborating with others and finding others where you can really complement each other. And the other thing that makes me think about too is this whole idea of weaknesses. And if we just spend a lot of time, we talked about this last time, knowing what our weaknesses are, focusing on trying to improve our weaknesses and all of that. But there's just such power in really focusing on your strengths and leaning into that. And anything, when you think about weaknesses, I think the way Gallup, and you can correct me on this, Sue, is I think the way Gallup says a weakness is anything that's getting in the way of your success. So even one of your strengths can be a weakness if it's being, like, for example, my second strength, and I'll pass it to you in just a sec, Sue, to make sure I've got this right as far as what Gallup says about the strengths and the weaknesses. But my second top strength is positivity. Well, that can, if I'm coming across as a Pollyanna all the time and, oh, everything is great, I have to make sure I know, who is my audience and show that I'm really considering, details and the situation at hand, because that could actually be a weakness if it's overused or used in the wrong way. So when you're thinking about a weakness, and especially if you've done an assessment and you see like, oh gosh, these areas I'm not strong in, therefore I must be weak in them. A weakness is really anything that's getting in the way of your success. Am I phrasing that right, Sue?
You are, and that's a great way to look at it. And it's interesting when you say the thing about positivity. Can you think of a strength that you lean into to, like, when you have an audience and you want to show up differently? What strength do you lean on for that?
Yeah, I think maybe a couple. I mean, maybe woo is one, and that's really wanting to win people over. Maybe it's input too. Maybe I can bring in outside resources and information. Input is basically, it's a Gallup talent theme, and it's basically says that, I'm curious. I'm always like collecting resources and information and sharing that. So I could bring, resources and information to be able to back up maybe what I'm saying, that kind of a thing. So that's just what comes to mind right off the top.
Yeah, and you also have individualization, which is that ability to understand people, right? In
Yeah,
groups.
I don't have it in my top 10.
Oh, you don't? Oh, sorry. I
No,
thought you did.
but that's okay.
Yeah, but so that's great. I love that your input is that curiosity, and it gives you that ability to sort of like read the group and bring in those resources that are essential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've shared a couple of my top 2 or 3. What about you, Sue?
So my top 5 are positivity, empathy. What is my third? Maximizer, strategic, and learner.
Love it.
So yeah, and I love what you said about sometimes we can bring too much of a good thing. I have an example about that actually. Gosh, a while back in my career, I found that when I would be in a group of people, like a planning meeting, um, because I have so many relationship building strengths, my first mode of operation is to, sort of be positive and support people and sort of take stuff in and observe. Even though I have a lot of strategic thinking strengths and a lot going on in my head, I don't always share what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I found that in a couple of meetings, I left feeling frustrated, like I didn't express myself and I didn't share my thoughts and ideas. And so I really had to sit down and say, okay, you know, a lot, sometimes those relationship building strengths are great. And of course they are always in a support role, but I needed to bring something different
Yeah.
to those meetings. And so I really had to intentionally lean into my learner and my maximizer, which is striving for excellence. The learner, I do a lot of planning and reading and learning about stuff. So I had to say to myself, you know what, I have knowledge on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to share that. It took some practice, but that's what's cool about knowing your strengths is that they become these tools that you can draw upon.
Yeah.
And if there is something too much of a good thing, that was too much of a good thing in my positivity and my empathy and all that, I had other things to draw upon.
Yeah.
So that I could show up as my best self and be in my strength zone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And and at the end of the day, we're so hard on ourselves. And I think that this is just such a great tool to put in our toolbox. In this whole journey of self-discovery, when, if you're listening to this and you're at a place where you're looking for a job, or you're wanting to change jobs, or you're wanting to pursue a dream, that maybe it's a dream you set up on the shelf and you're not sure you're ever going to get it back down. But just this piece of knowing your strengths is such an empowering tool to stick in your toolbox, because it just adds that confidence. It gives, like Sue, like what you said, you could draw on it. And the more you remember what your strengths are, the more you draw on them, the more exciting it is. I see this so much in my own life and in working with women, and even all the personal things where it's so cool to even just to get to know like my kids' strengths and then how I interact with them. And I don't know, I feel like it just really helps you to have compassion for yourself. It helps you to be kinder to yourself. It helps you to really have more confidence. And the same with, your interactions with other, really just valuing other people. So it's a really empowering thing to not just guess what you're good at, but really know what you're good at. So whether that's like the Clifton Strengths Assessment, which Sue and I both, we keep talking about it, and we don't get anything. We said this last time, we don't get any perks by recommending it. Wouldn't that be nice if we did, Sue?
yeah, it would be great.
Because I talk about it all the time.
Yeah, me too.
But whatever process, and again, go back to our previous video, in some ways you can discover your strengths. It's just so worth it. It's so worth investing the time and really understanding what you're good at. So any other examples or stories to share before we close, Sue?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I've had some people close to me in my life, go through some changes in their work and their career and things. And, it can be really hard when you're in transition, or if you're in a job that you don't love. And I was thinking about this on my walk this morning, but it's like to just know that if you're not in the right place, it's not about you. It's that you're not in a place where you get to use your strengths. And sometimes, there's things you can do about that. You can have conversations with your boss or your coworkers or yourself and figure out, what do I need to do to let myself be more in my strength zone? You have to be your own advocate. But some of it means that, if you're really in a place that's not a good fit, it's just information for you that it's time to look for something that is. Because we all have, we're all meant to share our gifts in the world, and there is a place for all of us. It's just, we need to be committed to finding it. And, it doesn't have to be done overnight. We talked about this in some of our other videos. It can be done in small steps, and just understanding your strengths and just being curious and be like, oh, okay, I'm not feeling that great in my work right now. Why is that? Just be curious about that, kind of get the information, and then, later on you can take some small steps to do something about it.
Yeah. I love that so much. I'm glad you said that, Sue. I love the reminder of small steps too, and that it doesn't have to be done overnight. And a lot of times it's testing, it's experimenting, it's a process, it's a journey, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as we wrap, so Sue and I were thinking about, what would be a good next step for this to really show how strengths play out. And we came up with this idea we want to invite you to take part in. So anyway, Sue, I'll turn it over to you if you want to share.
Yeah, we were just thinking that if any of you are interested in being coached on a Facebook Live with us, it would mean that you would take the assessment, and it could be your top 5, or it could be your full report. And Genny and I would coach you, and it would be super fun. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and I guess, what are we going to say? Whoever says yes, me first on in our group will be the person that gets to be coached.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I will follow up with some more information about that later.
Okay, in a post.
Yeah.
Awesome. And if that sounds kind of like, well, what does it mean? What do you mean you're going to coach me Facebook Live? What is that? And if you're not familiar with coaching, don't worry. It will be fun, we promise. And it's really about just us asking you questions to try to encourage you to find your own insights and explore and all of that. So it's not going to be like taking a test. It's not going to be anything scary or anything like that. So it'll be a really great process that hopefully you will benefit from and really enable you to get a deeper understanding of your strengths and what to do with them. Anything else to add on that?
Just that, you can share whatever you want, and it's just about your strengths. And so people that get coached on their strengths, I find it's a very uplifting experience, because it's all about what makes you, and we love it. So it'll be fun.
And it would be personal to you. So really helping you connect the dots, which is what we're talking about today. So with that, Sue and I just want to say thanks so much for joining us again. Cindy, thanks for your great questions. And we will be back here next Monday for another live conversation. And we just look forward to it. So thanks so much for being part of this group. Always feel free to reach out to us, comment, ask any questions. And we so appreciate being able to get to know all of you.
Have a great week, everyone.